Welcome back to the Deep Dive from the Luminous Souls channel. We're here to, cut through the noise and get you well informed fast.
And today, we're jumping straight into something really personal, really fundamental.
Yeah, how our thoughts and even the pictures we make in our minds are basically the foundation for our whole emotional world.
Right. Happiness, sorrow, fear, even physical feelings.
And we're drawing insights today from some fascinating excerpts, aren't we? From Thoughts, Feelings, and the Path to Contentment by Hazrat Khawaja Shams-ud-Din Azimi.
That's the one, a really rich source for this topic.
So our mission here is to unpack what these sources tell us about this incredible power our inner state, our thoughts, our beliefs actually holds, how it shapes the reality we experience.
And crucially, what that might mean for living with, well, less fear and less sorrow.
Okay, let's get right into it. The core idea. Happiness and sorrow are directly tied to our thoughts and mental images.
Exactly. The source uses the terms khayalat for thoughts and tasawwurat for those mental images or concepts. It's saying there's a direct link.
Not just an influence, but a direct link. That's quite a statement. What examples do the sources give, like for negative thoughts?
Well, the source points out that negative thoughts immediately generate feelings like fear, doubt, envy, greed, hatred, arrogance.
Okay, all the difficult emotions.
Yeah, they're the direct result, the byproduct of thinking those thoughts.
And positive thoughts, the flip side.
They yield, according to the source, things like love, altruism, certainty, humility, a completely different internal climate.
This becomes really vivid with the example the source uses about a sudden thought of an accident, maybe involving yourself or a child.
Right. The event hasn't actually happened. There's no danger right there in the moment.
But the thought alone.
It triggers everything, all the anxiety, the fear, the worry. You feel it, physically, emotionally, just from that mental image.
Wow. That really highlights the power, doesn't it? Compare that to imagining something joyful.
Yes, the source talks about imagining success or peace or prosperity.
And what happens then?
You can feel, and the source uses this lovely phrase, fountains of happiness welling up inside.
Again, nothing external changed, just the internal picture.
Exactly. It shows how potent that internal world really is.
And this power of thought, it seems, can become really deeply fixed, ingrained.
Oh, definitely. The source mentions patients who become so convinced, like absolutely certain they'll have an accident if they leave the house.
Do they just stop going out?
Precisely. The thought, the fear born from that mental image, it becomes their reality, stronger than anything outside. It's a self-imposed limitation based purely on thought.
That connects to phobias too, I imagine, like the fear of geckos or cats mentioned.
Absolutely. The source suggests these intense fears can become so dominant they lead to real mental distress, maybe even illness. And often there isn't a clear external trigger that makes sense for the level of fear.
So it starts as a thought, a hypothesis almost.
A hypothesis turned into a dominant, controlling, fear-inducing belief. It generates this internal reality of fear.
Okay, so if thought can create these really powerful negative states, sometimes even physical symptoms, can thought also be the way out, like a cure?
That's exactly what a really compelling case study in the source suggests. It's about a female patient with severe stomach pain.
Right, the pain happened after she ate, and she believed it was magic.
That was her firm belief, yes. Now her husband, doctors, they saw it as, baseless, a whim, no medical evidence for magic.
Standard treatments failed.
Completely. Digestive medicines apparently made it worse. She was hospitalized, spent a month in a psychological hospital, saw healers. Nothing worked.
So she ends up consulting the author, Hazrat Khawaja Shams-ud-Din Azimi, let's call him Jim, as you suggested. What did Jim do differently?
Well, crucially, he listened calmly, but then he deliberately waited for 15 days.
Why is it so late?
The source explains it was strategic. To build her trust, her belief in his ability to help, to really focus her concentration and expectation, he was working on her belief system first.
Makes sense. So what was the actual treatment?
He gave her very specific instructions. Sit quietly, eyes closed, at a precise time just before dawn. And while doing that, she had to vividly imagine Jim.
Imagine him. Doing what?
Believing with total certainty that he, Jim, was using spiritual power to remove the magical effect she thought was causing the pain.
Okay, so focusing her belief and imagination intensely, what did she experience?
According to her account in the source, she stayed awake, waiting, sat at the exact time, and felt these distinct waves transferring to her brain.
Waves, and then?
A powerful vision. She saw herself in a graveyard, digging up a doll with her name on it and throwing it into a well.
Whoa, and the pain.
Gone. Immediately. Vanished right at that moment, the vision concluded.
Just like that, a purely internal experience, a vision, and the physical symptom disappears. But the really key part is Jim's explanation afterwards, isn't it?
Yes. This is crucial. Jim stated very clearly. He only used the power of his thought, focused thought, to convey the idea to her that the effect was gone.
So no actual magic removal because there was no actual magic.
Exactly. He clarified there was no magic, no external effect. The pain disappeared because her belief in the magic, which was causing the symptom through thought, was dissolved. It was dissolved by her equally strong, guided belief that the cause was removed. Thought created it, belief dissolved it.
That's an incredible illustration of the mind-body connection driven purely by thought and belief. And, this isn't totally alien to modern science, is it? The sources even bring in a bit of neuroscience.
Right, they do. Think about having a really pleasant thought. The example given is a student imagining topping their class, feeling that success.
Okay, so what happens chemically in the brain then?
There's a release of neurotransmitters like dopamine. It's the brain's reward chemical.
Ah, dopamine. That feels good.
Exactly. That surge creates a temporary feeling of happiness, pleasure, motivation. It feels great. It mirrors that idea of fountains of happiness from a positive thought, doesn't it? It gives a kind of physiological basis for how thought generates feeling.
But it's temporary, tied to the thought fading.
Yes. As the thought fades, the dopamine levels drop and the feeling subsides. It highlights how these feelings, at least the chemically induced ones, are linked to these passing mental states.
Okay, so we've seen the power of thought on emotions, physical states, even linked to brain chemistry. Now, the sources take this into a spiritual dimension too.
They do. There's a reference to a verse. Upon the friends of Allah, there is no fear, nor do they grieve.
And the interpretation given in the source is quite direct about this.
It is. The source interprets this to mean that true friends of Allah are genuinely free from fear and sorrow. And conversely, it states that those who do experience fear and sorrow cannot, by this interpretation, be Allah's friends and are destined for hellfire.
That's a very strong interpretation presented in the material. It's important we state that's the view from the source.
Absolutely. We're relaying the interpretation provided there.
So according to this source, how does one move towards that state? Freedom from fear and sorrow.
Through spiritual training, what the source calls tarbiyah. It's about guiding people on the path. And the key insight is that fear and sorrow don't just leave on their own.
They leave only when something else is achieved.
Yes. Two specific states. Kana, which means contentment, basically, and istina.
Istina. How is that defined? It's more than just like being self-sufficient.
Yes. The source presents it as a deeper state. Detachment from everything except the absolute reality, hakikat mutlaq. It's described as a lived reality, a state achieved through that connection, not just a concept.
So there's a direct link proposed between achieving these states and losing fear.
A direct correlation, yes. The source states that the degree to which you attain kana, contentment, and destina, that detachment connect to the absolute, directly corresponds to the degree that fear, dread, and sorrow diminish within you.
It's another layer showing how internal states are seen to shape our fundamental experience.
Right, from fleeting thoughts to these deep spiritual alignments.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. The undeniable core insight from these excerpts seems to be that our thoughts, our beliefs, they aren't just floating ideas. They are active architects.
Architects of our emotional reality, our physical experience sometimes, influencing moods, persistent conditions like that patient's pain.
And even, according to the spiritual perspective in the source, potentially our ultimate state of being.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Considering how powerful our thoughts and ingrained beliefs are shown to be. How much might your own unquestioned beliefs, your fears, those mental images you hold?
How much might they be limiting your life right now, perhaps in ways you haven't even fully realized?
And if contentment, kanat, and that state of inner detachment, istina, are presented as the pathway to lessening fear and sorrow, what would it actually look like to consciously cultivate those qualities in your own life?
Definitely something profound to reflect on.